Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei and I'm so excited to paint with you again today. We're going to do another page in our watercolor journals, and today we're going to just focus on some simple, very entry-level beginner watercolor flowers. These are one of the first things that kind of a go-to for those who are just learning basic things like water control, how to activate their paints, how to utilize their brush and hold it in different ways to get thin lines and thicker lines. So these are a great go-to, especially if you're a beginner, and even if you're not, these are just a fun kind of warm-up exercise that you can do. And also filler flowers if you're painting something more complex. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to try to mix all my colors today from the primaries. You all know, if you've been following for a while, I'm big on mixing. So I'm going to start with some magenta, Quinacridone magenta. Oh, and let me go over. I'm using a size 4 round brush. Mine happens to be a Princeton Velvet Touch brush, but any round brush will do. Bell hung sketchbook. This is 140 pound cold pressed paper. Some folks mentioned that it would be really helpful if I mentioned the size of the sketchbook. So this is about 6 by 9 approximately. It's like 6.2 by 9.4 or something like that, but about 6 by 9. And my core paints. So I primarily paint with Core, QOR by Golden, but any paints that you have in similar colors will work just fine. So if you do Winsor & Newton or Daniel Smith or any of the other popular brands or even store brands, they will work just fine. All right, so I have my Quinacridone magenta. I am going to, for my blue today, I'm going to use Ultramarine. Which Ultramarine is always a fun blue. It's granulating, so it's a warm blue, and it does granulate, and what that means is upon drying there is some separation that occurs. And I'm going to make a purple, but I want this purple to be more on the blue side, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue. There we go. And I'm going to add some water to get a nice light mix. All right, so first I'm going to start with basically making just oval shapes that come together at a base. Okay, so they come together here at a base, and then I'm going to make a bunch of these. And then connect them with a stem. And these are kind of made up. They're reminiscent of flowers or florals that you'll see out there, but not an exact representation of any one particular thing. And then I also like to, as things are drying, just drop in a little bit darker color at the base. Gives it a little dimension, a little fun. And because I'm working on 100% cotton paper, things do take a while to dry, so I have time. I have lots of time to work with them if I want to work with them wet on wet still. So I can even take some kind of straight blue and drop it in. These are still wet up here, even though, and then that gives it a lot of kind of fun. And again, because this ultramarine is granulating, as it dries, it's going to even look a little bit more interesting. Things are going to separate a little. Some people hate that. That's okay. You do not have to use ultramarine. You can use many different blues that are not granulating. But if you like that granulating look, ultramarine is a great color. And I really love it. I love the texture it gives, the interest it gives. To me, I think it could be really fascinating. Sure, there may be times when I don't want that, but right, so I have my sap green out here, just pulled it out. I want to keep this pretty dark. And I'm going to make sure my brush has a nice, I'm going to roll it like this, back and forth. I don't know if you can see that, but like roll it back and forth to create the nice tip on the end. And then I'm going to start to come from the base of the flower, and it's wet on wet again, so some of that green is going to seep into the flower itself. And then I don't want to go through flowers, so I'm going to follow the line down, kind of follow. But don't try to kind of snake around flowers. Just pick your brush up, skip over it, and move on. I'm going to make some other stems that maybe go into nowhere for now. I can always add flowers later. So I'm using the very tip of my brush trying to keep things very thin. Right, let's add on a few more flowers. Add one like over here. Maybe over here. Maybe I'll do one facing downward. Just drop a little blue in there, a little blue. Core paints really like to explode wet on wet, so if you have core and you're not used to that, it does take a little getting used to, but I love it. Whereas I find like Daniel Smith, or I'm sorry, Winsor & Newton Cotman, which I do a lot, and a lot of folks buy as entry-level paints, student grade paints, they tend to need a little help wet on wet, like moving across the area. All right, so let's start to put in some leaves. So I'm going to start here, and they're going to be basically almost the same shape as the petals of the flowers, just tiny little and how I do that is just by pressing down. Oh, I'm so sorry to bump the camera, but pressing down. So I drag the tip of my brush out, and then I just press down gently, drag, and then pull up slowly. And you might do that 1 or 2 times per leaf. 1, 2. You can go from the top to the bottom too. And you can kind of keep filling this in as much as you want and playing, but there is our first little simple beginner, entry-level, beginner-friendly watercolor flower. All right, let's move on to the next. All right, so for the next one, we're going to do a basic kind of front-facing petal flower where we're taking these petals. These are all facing upwards, and like the base of it kind of connects to the stem here. I'm going to turn those towards us and open it up so we see a center. So a petal flower with a center. So I'm going to use yellow, I think, for this one. So a nice light yellow. This is cadmium yellow, medium hue. And so now I'm going to paint a slightly wider petal. So you can see that's a little bit bigger, then these are a little more narrow, but it gets narrow at the center and widest at the top. And whoever is most comfortable for you to paint these in a couple of strokes, And I'm going to put at least 5 around. You could even fit in 6 maybe, but I'm going to do 5. You can leave little white spots, and I'm going to leave the center open. I don't know if you can see that, but there's white space in the center. I don't bring them completely together. And sometimes it can help to draw that center out so that you can keep your petals going and moving around it and hold that space. So just putting a little circle in that you put all your petals around. So let's do like 4 or 5 of these flowers. But I do like to leave little gaps of white space inside the petals as well. And if you're using a light color, this again is another way that you could definitely add like another color, wet on wet, into the center here. So if we took a little magenta, and like let's water it down a bit because this is very delicate yellow. But magenta, so or red and yellow, magenta and yellow will make orange. So if I add just a little of this, it's going to be pretty. I'll just do it to a couple, and I'll leave a couple the way they are. But it's going to give it like, it's going to mix with the yellow and give it like an orangey hue to it. So we'll just do a couple. You could just do darker yellow too in the center or along the edges. So if you wanted to leave if you want it to be lightest in the middle and darker, more colorful around the edges, we could do that too. We'll do one of those as an example. Add some more water to this. And don't worry, we'll add in some greenery shortly. So let's take that same magenta, water it down, and then if we wanted to do darker around the edges, leave it more yellow in the center, you can do that as well. All right, let's do one more and then we'll add greenery, and then we're going to put our centers in. So again, this is just exploring different parts of flowers in general. Petals of all different shapes and sizes combined together, not necessarily trying to recreate an exact replica of a certain species or type of flower, but just let's create some floral-like things. All right, so for this cluster up here, we're pretty close to dry. So the centers, a lot of things can happen with the centers. Just want to blend this out a little bit. A few of these were a little dry when I dropped in that extra color. There we go. You can have just kind of a plain flat center, or you can have lots of little dots in the center, which kind of show you that, well, different types of flowers have different types of centers, and you know, they're made up of different elements and pieces. So we're going to do one that has lots of little dots in it. So we're going to use, I find, you could use black, but I really like to do something like a brown. I have some burnt sienna here, or a combination of like brown and black. So it has a little dimension. So little dots of brown. And if things are still wet and it bleeds into it, that can be lovely as well. But I do want them to be pretty dry. I want to actually see the dots. So just dot, 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 dot. And then I am going to add a little bit darker color. So you can pick up, I'm going to add just a little Payne's Gray to this burnt sienna. Get a darker color. Just add a few. The one below, it was still a little too wet. Some of these are still a little too wet for that, but so this one really got away from me. So let's let them dry a little bit more. And I'm just pulling out color, and then I added some more yellow. All right, so let's let them dry. While we're letting them dry, we're going to add our green again. So I'm just going to connect these from the center as little clusters. Using the sap green, and you can make longer leaves. Same thing with this little group up here. To roll that brush. You can bring leaves out the top. Leaves don't always have to be just around the bottom. And there we go. All right, I think these are dry enough that I can really focus on those centers. So let's go back to some burnt sienna, because this one just got completely washed out. And I'm just going to do little dots. There we go. All right, and there's our nice little simple petal flowers. Let's do one more. All right, for the last one, I'm going to give you a combination of buds and flowers. So this one is going to be kind of a combination of these two, where it's going to be wider petals. We're definitely going to use wet on wet. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually put water down for my flower. And it's going to be like it's going to be like this, but much wider. And the center is going to be bigger. You're going to see it in a second. You can't see the water. And then I'll draw it out for you in a moment. I'm going to take my pink and I'm going to drop it in at the base. And you're going to see it start to fill in the shape of the petal itself, and it's going to get lighter and lighter as it moves through the water and goes up to the top. So if I were to help it along here, which the others I'm not going to help along, I'm going to let them do their thing, but just so you can see kind of the full shape that we did. And this one goes out even a little wider this way. This is the shape of these. And then we're going to drop in this green at the base or the center here. We want it to be wet on wet. You could let it dry a little bit more, but that combination looks really beautiful. So in addition to magenta, we can also combine different colors. So we can put magenta in and then add in a little yellow to give it an orangey color. So let's show you what that looks like. So again, I'm going to paint in this flower. You could have maybe a tiny little stain. See how mine is a little tinted? I didn't rinse my brush off completely. That'll help you see it a little better for sure. All right, so these wide 3 or 4 petals that kind of come together at the center. We're going to drop in some magenta. And then I'm also going to drop in right behind that some yellow. So the colors are going to mix along with the water. You're going to get lots of variation in value of color and also different colors as the colors mix together. And then dropping in a little green, just touch it very slightly. This one got a little crazy. All right, and then we're also going to do, let's do some little buds on the end. So you can also do a little bud, same way, by just let's put in a little oval. So basically just the center of like one of these. Let's do 2, like right on the edge of the page here. Drop in some magenta. Now you don't have to help it, you don't. You're just going to let it go and it's going to travel. It doesn't look like it's made it all the way to the top, it will. And then if you want to drop in another color, you can do that as well, or you can just leave them pink. And then we are going to put a little bit of green. They're a little too wet still. Look how far that green traveled. So this can be really fun to practice because it'll help you get an idea of drying time and how much. A great little exercise for your watercolor journal. So let's do a couple more of those. I love this peachy pink, orangey yellow color. I'm going to do a couple of buds down here. Boop, boop, boop. And the more paint you push in, the brighter the color will be. You can wait a little bit. So let's wait a little bit while those dry. We'll do one more flower while they dry a little bit, just so our green doesn't move as much. We're going to give these guys their due time to kind of process. And then we'll add a little bit more, or we'll add the green stem. So let's do one more flower over here just to distract ourselves so we don't mess with it. I'm running out of space. Do we all see the yellow paint on my finger? No idea where I got it from. I think when I was cleaning out my watercolor paint on your hands is dangerous because it looks like it's dry, but the minute it gets wet or touches anything moist, it instantly reactivates. Unlike if you get acrylic paint on your hand and it dries, it's like, cool, it's dry, I just gotta peel it off later. It's not gonna bother anything. Watercolor paint, not so much. So this one, I only got like 2 buds in over here. But you know what? We're going to make that work. Let's put some green along the edge here. There we go. And it's just kind of a crooked one. And I think these are dry enough that we can let some green interact with them. Yeah, so it's just going to bleed up a little bit. There we go. We got some cute little buds. So there are 3 simple ways to make some beautiful, lovely, but yet simple flowers, especially for beginners. Obviously got a little carried away, made this one too big, kind of got cramped as we went along. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials. You can follow me on Instagram. So if you do have an Instagram account and you post your photos of these projects and tag me in them, at Shayna Cersei, I will be able to see them and also reshare them on my own story. So that's something you could definitely do. Folks ask, sometimes email me their work and ask how they can share it. So that is one way that you can definitely share it with me. I love seeing your attempts. Don't forget to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and send it to a friend who might also enjoy watching these watercolor tutorials, or share it on your own social media. So thank you so much. I can't wait to paint with you again. So happy painting, y'all, and I'll see you for our next watercolor journal page very soon.